Welcome to Domaine Dogs. Today I'd just like to do a little video about the winter pruning. So this is the vines are now 4 years old, and so we have, because of the different levels of vigour within the vines, we have a couple of different ways of pruning the vines depending on how strong they are and how well developed they already are. I'll show you a couple of those today. But just to begin with, this is it's mid-January. It's a very beautiful but very cold day today, so kind of perfect time to start the winter pruning. It is possible to start earlier than now, and indeed many of the vineyards, particularly this year, if they have a lack of available labour, can start a little bit earlier. But ideally you really want to leave it as late as you can, but make sure that you get the job done before spring arrives. So if you do it a little bit too early, there's a chance that the buds will start again in March time, something like that, when there's quite a high risk of having a frost. We had a very, very hard frost. Actually, it was in early April, I think, last year. And so if you had pruned early or too early last year, you would have lost quite a lot of crop, possibly even killed some of the vines. So we try to leave it as late as we can. I think mid-January seems to be when I'm confident that I can get the job done before the end of March. And realistic, if the weather stays good, I can probably get it done before the end of February, which seems sensible. So I'll just show you the lay of the land. The noise that you can hear is our beloved geese. This is the top of the vineyard. You can see some of the geese here. The first group and then the second group are actually in the rows. The little village in the distance, you see the church there. That is Odox itself, the metropolis of Odox. Our house is just round this corner. And that is the larger mountain in the background is the Pic d'Ani, where Pierre Saint-Martin is. And then if we carry on round the chain of the Pyrenees, you can see some of the other peaks. So this the vineyard here, this is south-southwest. So it's pretty much ideally exposed towards the sun. So the sun rises here in the east, and then traverses over and sets over here in the west. So really throughout the year, we have a pretty sunny sight throughout pretty much all of the day. We're also protected by trees on both sides. Most of the wind comes here from the west. And so we've left, for the minute at least, quite a lot of oak trees in possession in order to protect the vines from the wind. So first up, just a little bit of overview in terms of equipment. There's not that much equipment that you really need to do manual pruning like we're doing. Probably the most important stuff, to be honest, is the right clothing. So just suitable for the day. The one thing that I add is knee pads. So our vines are quite low trained, so they when you're actually getting down to the cordon, it's uncomfortable to do a day's work if you're standing up and bending over, and therefore it's actually much easier just to get on your knees and to do the pruning from there. So I use knee pads. The other equipment, I have a finger knife. So that's a knife that allows me to cut twine or tubing without sort of in the middle of the knot. So you can tie the knot and cut it off without too many wrist movements that end up being very tiring over the course of the day. So for tying materials, I use two different types of tying materials. First is a rubber tubing, which is used to securely but not too tightly tie in the trunks usually, or sometimes the cordons, onto the supports. So it's areas that are living wood, and that through the season will change in diameter, and therefore you need to give them a bit of space in order to not cut off the sap flow through the year. And then secondly, for areas at the end of each cordon that you want to be able to tie very tightly to the cordon wire, For instance, if you want to prevent it from slipping round, if you've tied it in a twist. It's an armoured jute, so it's jute strings, like ordinary kind of twine, I suppose, but which has a core of wire that runs through it, which allows you to tie it very, very tightly. Both of them can be cut using the little finger knife that I keep on my hand whilst I'm pruning. In terms of secateurs, there's a choice of really electric or manual. I think if our vineyard was very much bigger than it is, I would probably end up having to go for an electric secateur, and I quite like a bit of technology behind, so that would be okay. However, they're not quite as flexible when you use them, and so you probably can't be quite as accurate. And the reality is we don't really have enough vines in order to, we have about 2,500 vines, so within a season that might be 10,000 cuts or something like that. It's not actually enough in order to really justify the relatively substantial investment in a pair of electric secateurs. So I use Felco 8s, which is this kind of secateur. Personally, I just used the Baco type and a few other models, and I just prefer these ones. They're also, you can get all the parts individually. The only other thing that I do use a holster, which is really important because you end up tying the vine and don't want the secateurs in your hands. The second thing that I have is a little diamond sharpener, so that every hour or so I can sharpen up the blade. It only takes a few swipes, and it keeps the blade nice and sharp and making nice clean cuts. So the only other thing that I really have is some gloves in case it's really cold, and a kind of a multi-tool thing with a knife on it and pliers in case there's a problem with the wires or stuff like that that I need to adjust as I'm going through. So now I'll go into the vines and I'll show you two different types of pruning that we're going to do this year. So here we have a vine that's one of the more vigorous vines within the vineyard. It's only 4 years old, but it reached the cordon within the first year. The cordon's the fruiting wire here. And so what we're looking to try and do is to prune the vine to 4 growing points, each of which has got 2 buds on it. So we'll end up with 8 buds, which will become 8 shoots per vine, and we'll then reduce the fruit to either 1 or 2 bunches per shoot, which should lead us to between 10 and 12 grape bunches per vine, and a yield of hopefully around 30 hectolitres per hectare. So looking at this vine, we need to find the 4 growing points. So we use a system here of soft pruning, so we're going to try and prune from the same direction in the vine each year, in order to make sure that the pruning wounds are all on the same side of the trunk. It's called soft pruning. And we're also, the training system is called oblique cordon. So that's cordon mostly on this side, but with one of the growing points on the other side of the vine. And that just helps a little bit if you're on a slope, in order to prevent too much elongation of the growing points. So first of all, looking at this position here, we need to get that down to 2 growing points. So we don't want the vine growing in this direction, towards the vine to its left, and in general we want to be doing the pruning from the top, and therefore in order to keep the sap flow all in the same place, or the wounds all in the same place. So we'll clip off this, take off the dead woods here, the little shiko. This needs to be removed completely, but I don't want to cut it too close to the main trunk part here, or the main carrying part, because that could die back into the actual shoot here and create some problems. So I'm going to take it off about here, about 1 centimetre away, and then just nick off with the secateurs, nick off the bud, because I don't want that budding. And then we're left here with a reasonably nice looking shoot coming out in this direction. I need to take that to 2 buds. So here we have a bud that's probably the basal bud right there. Then 1, 2, so I'll cut it off just past that. So looking at the rest of the vine, we have a number of shoots from last year. So there's, in terms of good shoots, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we need to take that to 3. We want them to be evenly spaced and for each of them to have 2 buds. So the first one's not very well positioned because it's coming out from underneath the actual cordon itself. So I'm just going to take that off again, leaving a gap so that it can die back without affecting the sap flow within the trunk itself. Then we have a choice to make here. I think I'll probably keep this one. It's not terribly, usually the middle shoots, the middle branches aren't as vigorous as the first one or the last one. It's a thing called apical dominance. But you get what you're given, so we need to work out which ones we're going to keep and which ones we're going to prune off. So I think of these 3, I need to keep 2 of them. And in terms of spacing, I'm tempted to remove this one and keep the other 2. Okay, so I'll take off the one in the middle. The one in the middle and the one on the right had about the same level of vigor. So it's just a positioning question. And here, so we're counting, you can see there's probably a basal bud there, 1 bud, 2 buds. So we'll cut it off here. It's a nice 2 bud spur. Just remove the sarmal. And then on this one, again, similarly, there'll be a basal bud somewhere down there. I'll just to make sure that I actually get 2 buds in this, I'm going to keep this and this one. So I'll take there, just clip off that from last year. So now we have the first position, second position, third position. This didn't really grow, so I'll just clean that up, rub that bud out. And then here I have to decide between one of these 2 positions. Both of them look quite healthy. They're both growing in the right kind of direction. So I'm not terribly concerned as to which one it is. I think probably there's a little bit more vigor, unsurprisingly, in the last one, so I shall keep the last position. So I'll take this one off. I'll take it there, and then just nick off the bud. And then here for the last one, you can see there's a basal bud down. You can see the basal bud is down there. Then there's a full bud here, and a full bud here, and a full bud here. So I'll take it off about a centimetre again above that, clip it there, and we've got a 2 bud position there. So you can see the vine that's remaining, not completely ideally spaced, but we have 1, 2, 3, 4 spurs, each with 2 buds, which should hopefully later in the year produce 8 growing shoots. So now we're in a slightly different part of the vineyard, with a vine that's showing less vigor than the last one, probably just due to the soil depth here, possibly a little bit lack of water or something during the summer. So it's 1 or 2 years behind the previous one, and last year this vine wasn't vigorous enough in order to be on the cordon. So we kept it at 4 buds on a vertical shoot, and with the idea of selecting 1 to be the cordon for this year. So now we need to make that selection. So if you look at the 4 shoots that are there, the 4 strong ones from last year, we've got 2 relatively weak ones at the bottom and 2 stronger ones here. So that's pretty handy. So we'll just clip off the 2 bottom ones, again leaving a little bit of a space for the die back to be able to occur without providing any problems for the actual for the vine itself. This sarmal here, I would like to keep as the part of the future cordon that's going to go up the hill from the vine, so in the oblique cordon system. So I will cut it to 2 buds. There's if you can see around this side, there's a basal bud here. There's another bud that's, to be honest, is probably basal as well. Here, then a full bud here, and a full bud there. So for safety, I'm going to cut it off here. I think some people might take it off there and count this as a full count bud, but we can do that work later in the spring if it provides 3 shoots rather than 2. Then this sarmale here needs to become the future cordon. So that is a little bit too long at the minute. Shows some nice vigor. So I shall cut it off here, and then we will take it down onto the wire itself and tie it in. I'll show you the knot in a second. So the first knot is a very straightforward one. So I'm taking the flexible tubing, and we do a little loop behind the vine in order to give it a bit of space, basically, and then tie it to the steel support. This is called a tuteur. Just provides a little bit of vertical help for the vine. The reason why we tie it is mostly to make sure that the vine stays vertical. So we don't really want it spreading out into the rows. The vines do have a tendency to try and travel, and we really need to keep them in the vertical plane and within the row rather than moving out. Secondly, we need to make sure that this actual sarmale, this branch, stays on the wire. So this is the fruiting wire itself. So for that, what we'll do is we'll actually use a different kind of string. So this we'll use an armoured twine, and I'll tie it at the end much more tightly and with a different kind of knot. Okay, so I've taken the sarmale onto the wire and tied it with the armoured twine. If you can see that, I'll get the camera to focus actually on my hand rather than you can see behind my finger, hopefully, the armoured twine. And now the very last stage is just to remove the buds that you don't want. There's too many buds on this, and there's also an old so this part here was the original this was the original trunk, so I'm just going to snip that off. There was some growth in it, so it's still alive, so I don't want to cut it too close to the trunk, so I'll snip it off there. And then just with my thumbnail I'm going to take off the buds that I don't want. So ideally we want 2 buds here, and then probably 3 or 4 buds pointing vertically along the wire. It doesn't really matter whether it's 2, 3, 4, 5. If we get too many shoots, we can take them off in the epombrage in the spring. But we want to make sure that we don't have 10 or 15. So I'm just going to take off any of the buds that are badly positioned, like that one there. I don't want. They come off quite easily. There's one underneath here, which is going in the wrong direction. There's one underneath here, which is going to be going in the wrong direction as well. One under there. And finally, one under here. So I've taken those off. So you can see we're left with 1 bud here, 1 bud here, 1 bud here, 1 bud here, and 1 bud here. And then the 2 in the final one. So that vine is now done and happy for the winter. Just another 3,000 or so to go.